Sometimes your best just isn't good enough. The Devils dropped game two to the Hurricanes by a score of 3-1. They were missing some key players entering this game, and one controversial call did not go in their favor. In fact, nothing was called as a result. We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Steven stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, College Hockey Club play announcer, Devils Wire Pucks Pitchforks, and also part-time Credential Me a member, Trey Matthews. Okay, the good news is the Devils performed much better in Game 2 against the Hurricanes. The bad news is it still wasn't good enough. The Devils trailed the series 2-0, and they head back to the Prudential Center on Friday. I hope they're able to turn the series around. They got to protect home ice, but it's not really looking all that good. They're down to their final 2 strikes. 2 more losses, their season is done. I guess some more good news is the Devils aren't the only team down 0-2 in a series. The Blues trail the Jets 2-0. The Senators trail the Leafs 2-0 in the Battle of Ontario. We'll see how this goes, but I'm really hoping that the Devils can use their home crowd and get some nice home cooking at the Rock. By the way, I will be at games 3 and 4 covering the game in the press box. So if you see me around the Prudential Center, don't be afraid to come up and say hi. All right, let's break down this game. In the first segment, I will share my main takeaways from the game. Then in the second segment, we're going to talk about some controversy between 2 former Sharks teammates, Brent Burns and Timo Meier. It happened towards the end of the second period, and the Devils should have gotten a lengthy power play as a result, but nothing was called. We will also hear from head coach Sheldon Keefe, and then in the third and final segment, I will compare the stats and give the Devils a letter grade. Let's start with the big news heading into this game. Luke Hughes and Brendan Dillon did not play due to injury. If you recall, in Game 1, both of them went down with injuries. Brendan Dillon did not return to the game despite pleading with the doctors to let him go back out there, but they had to sort of restrain him. I did have my hopes up because I was under the impression, like, if he's good to go in Game 1, if he felt as though he was ready, maybe he would be good to go for Game 2. Luke Hughes actually did return from action. As you guys recall, he went crashing into the net in the third period. He grabbed his upper body. He went down the tunnel, but he returned. But apparently he was wincing in pain anytime he was not on the ice. So what do? You insert Shimon Nemitz and Dennis Cholowski, both of them making their playoff debuts. Yeah, the Devils were pretty shorthanded to begin this game, and the odds were not in their favor. But you just got to work with what you're being given. Being adaptable is part of what makes a great team. I think both of them held their own, but it just wasn't an ideal circumstance for the Devils. But I think the big thing for New Jersey was their change of attitude. And I hate to use generalities when assessing a game, but PK Subban said it best during the intermission report, which is the Devils came out with a lot more energy, and you saw that in the first period. I'll talk about that momentarily, but like I said, Dillon and Hughes did not play in this game, so a lot of defensemen had to step up in their absence. Shout out to Dougie Hamilton. He led all skaters in ice time. Brian Dumoulin, I think he did a good job. Brett Pesce, you could say whatever you want to say about Pesci, but you cannot deny his heart and his determination, willing to put his body on the line, block a shot out in front. I'm sure Jacob Markstrom appreciated the valiant effort from Pesci, and that was just very entertaining to watch. So just wanted to give those players their roses, because when we talk about a change of attitude, I think of those three defensemen that really stepped up their games when it mattered most. In the first period, the Devils outshot the Hurricanes 9-6. They had good offensive zone pressure. They were playing with a much faster pace. They even took their first lead in the entire series thanks to Jesper Bratt. They had a 1-0 lead heading into the second period. But obviously, just having a 1-0 lead, that's not going to keep the Hurricanes at bay. You knew that they were going to fight back with everything that they had. Sheldon Keefe even said that it doesn't really come down to X's and O's. It comes down to physicality, heart, determination, because that's what Rod Brindamore preaches to his team. And the Hurricanes, I would say, are one of the more physical teams in the league. Come the second period, Shane Gostisbehere, he collected his own rebound, put it past Jacob Markstrom. Markstrom made the save initially, just it popped out to the wrong person. And then Jordan Martinook, he scored a short-handed goal. Here's a fun fact for you. The Devils had the second best penalty kill in the NHL this regular season. But guess who was number one? The Hurricanes. And they showed it. They had a couple of 2-on-1 odd man rush advantages, and Martinook took advantage of one, getting the game-winning goal and basically taking the momentum away from the Devils. It came down to special teams once again, and that's going to be very important. Remember that, because I'll discuss that a little bit more in the second segment. The third period, once again, the Devils fought hard. They had their chances, but they were snake bitten. I don't think anybody was more snake bitten than Timo Meier. He had 5 shots on goal, and he walked away with nothing, not a single point. The players that walked away with points, Jesper Bratt, because he scored the goal, Erik Haula, he got the primary assist, and Dougie Hamilton. Timo Meier, like I said, 5 shots on Freddie Anderson, Nico Hischier, Paul Cotter, Stefan Nason, you name it. They were wrecking havoc on Anderson, but he was making some big-time saves. And at that point, the Devils were trying their best to get one past him, so that way they can at least send it to OT and maybe try again there. Unfortunately, they came out on the losing end by a score of 3-1, because in the third period, Seth Jarvis got the empty netter goal, and now the Devils trail the series 2-0 as a result. Another wasted, valiant effort from Jacob Markstrom. I can't put these 2 losses on Markstrom's shoulders. He's been holding his end of the bargain. We've been talking about towards the end of the regular season how Markstrom had been struggling since the injury, but he has really leveled up his game since the playoffs started. Expected goals against, 4.75. Actual goals scored on him, 2. Goals saved above expected rating, 2.76. He had a .926 save percentage. He saw 25 shots and made 24 saves. The Devils' efforts went for naught. They came out aggressive. I like their forechecking. I love their offensive zone time. Unfortunately, they only had 1 goal to show for it. And Freddie Anderson, he was good in between the pipes for the Hurricanes. But there was one call at the end of the second period that really could have helped the Devils. What happened? Well, I'm going to talk about that momentarily. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about FanDuel, because I want to see you guys make some extra money. On the bright side, at least my Lakers tied it up against the Timberwolves, so at least I got something. The NBA playoffs are almost here. and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet. You'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team, the Lakers once again, or diving into player props. Luka Doncic, he went off. Austin Reeves went off. LeBron James went off. Lakers in 5, in the words of Shannon Sharp. Don't miss out. Head to fanduel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. Okay, let's talk about some controversy, shall we? Brent Burns, at the end of the second period, headbutted Timo Meier. What happened? Well, the horn sounds. Players are supposed to go to their respective benches, head to the locker rooms. Well, Timo Meier, he exchanged a minor hit on Brent Burns, and Burns decided to respond by headbutting him. And he was smiling and just trying to get underneath Meier's skin. Both of them are former teammates. They played with the Sharks, but you can't headbutt a player. I looked back at it multiple times and I was trying to figure out why wasn't Burns docked with anything, because I was just trying to see like why wasn't he dinged with a penalty. I was looking at his arm. Did he put his arm out first and then just like happen to like slide into Meier or something like that? I was looking at it meticulously, and just based from my perspective, it looked like that Burns did lead with his head, which is a no-no. Bill Spalding, the play-by-play announcer for the Devils, shared on his social media the rules and regulations when it comes to headbutting and also the repercussions. By NHL definition, headbutting, the act of headbutting involves a player making intentional contact or attempting to make contact with an opponent by leading with his head and or helmet. If you look back at the replay, you could see that Burns led with his head and he was smiling. He didn't seem remorseful at all. So what's the penalty? Well, here are a few options. Double minor penalty. A double minor penalty shall be imposed on a player who attempts to headbutt an opponent. Major penalty. A major penalty shall be imposed on a player who headbutts an opponent. Match penalty. A match penalty shall be imposed on a player who injures an opponent as a result of a headbutt. Luckily, Meier was not injured. Game misconduct penalty. When a major penalty is assessed under this rule, a game misconduct penalty must be imposed. Fines and suspensions. Refer to Rule 23.6. Fines and suspensions, physical infractions category. There are no specified fines or suspensions for headbutting. However, supplementary discipline can be applied by the commissioner at his discretion. I doubt that Gary Bettman is going to suspend Burns, especially during the playoffs, because I don't think he wants the series to shift momentum in any which sort of way because of someone breaking the rules. I think the referees and the commissioner, they don't want to police the game in that sort of aspect. But anyway, the referees got this wrong. And this is important because the Devils should have gotten some power play time. Not only that, some extended power play time. In the third period, I talked about how the Devils still had some decent momentum on their side. They had a power play about 6 or so minutes into the third period, and their power play was clicking. They were generating a lot of shots on Anderson, or they were generating a lot of good looks. Unfortunately, like I said in the first segment, Anderson was standing on his head. He was really good. I got to give credit where credit is earned. But the fact that the Devils could have had an extended power play, that really could have helped them because they were down 2-1. That could have gotten them the game tying goal, whatever. So the referees absolutely got that wrong. And you could see that Burns headbutts Meier. He doesn't seem remorseful. He's smiling in his face. ESPN was talking about it. Every news outlet was talking about it. Same headline, Burns headbutts Meier. So I don't think this is a subjective matter. I think everybody is in agreement. Meier was headbutt by Burns. I see some people complaining on social media saying, like, why didn't any of Meier's teammates come to his aid and start fighting? Well, I think everyone knows the reason for that, because you don't want to get a bunch of penalties when you're already down in the count. If you're the Devils, they can't afford to lose anyone for an extended period of time. But digressing a little bit, the referees got this wrong, at least from my perspective. All right, let's hear what head coach Sheldon Keefe had to say about this particular outing. Take a listen.
Talked yesterday about just needing to sort of raise the level. Did you see that from your group? And what did you kind of like particularly about the way you guys came out tonight in that first period?
Yeah, I thought our guys took charge. They had lots of fight in them early. I thought we had fight all game. Competed at a very high level. Like lots about our game. Obviously, special teams end up being the difference again, but I thought our guys gave it everything they had today, and easily could have had this one go the other way, but it's not the way it worked out. So we'll just take this one, take this effort, and build some confidence out of it and take it home.
Is one of those things just the defensive effort, really? Just the way you had two young guys come in, and just as a group, you guys kept their shot total low. We've talked so much about that too.
Yeah, I mean, the four guys that took on the bulk of the work on defense did an unbelievable job for us. I thought Nemec also came in and gave us good minutes. Cholowski, when we needed him to get the guys a breather, did a nice job. So, yeah, I thought that group did well despite the circumstances, and forward group helped them. Put a lot of pressure on the puck. Got control of the game early. Put us in a good spot. Like I said, special teams are the difference, and we knew coming into this series our power play has been our edge, all season long, and it was going to be a real challenge for us going up against this penalty kill, and that it could be a big factor in the series, and that's really what is, in a lot of ways, kind of been the story in the first two games.
When a guy like Anderson gets so hot and is seemingly stopping everything, what do you say, what do you do to make adjustments to tell your team, hey, to try and get those floodgates to open?
I mean, it's less about the goaltender for me. We need more volume, It's there's big gaps between the saves and between the flurries, so we need to put a little more pressure on the goaltender. But he was great today. Obviously, I think, we didn't generate a lot, but the ones we did, we had some good looks. Our power play in the third period, another day probably gets one. But, you just got to stay with it. But the challenge remains the same. We need more volume of scoring chances. 5-on-5, there's not a lot there for us. We've done a good job. I mean, we've only given up 3 5-on-5 goals in the series in 2 games, but only scored 1. So it's been... you're losing that battle, you're losing the special teams battle. That's what's got you in a hole.
To close out my main takeaways from the game, the Devils, they did play hard. Unfortunately, sometimes your best is not good enough. They're heading back to their barn, the Prudential Center. I'm hoping that the rock is bumping, because I think they can use some of that good old home cooking. And I said this entering the series, which is the Devils are a really good team when they're leading after the second period. But if they're trailing after the second period, they only have 1 win this season. So once the Devils were trailing 2-1, entering the third and final period of regulation, I kind of had trouble having faith in them. I'm trying my best, but it's not easy. I think everyone can agree with me on that. This playoff run is completely different from the 2023 playoff run, because I think the Devils had a legitimate chance to make some noise. They were just a little inexperienced. They weren't really physical, but in this series, they're missing some key assets. They've been inconsistent since the Christmas break. Every season is different, but it's an improvement from last year. That's all I got to say. Let's see what games 3 and 4 have in store. And I'm just going to say this. I really hope the Devils can make it a competitive series once again. But if these are the final 2 games for the Devils, enjoy it. Seriously, that's all I got to say. Just Just enjoy it. All right. We're going to compare stats and give the Devils a letter grade momentarily. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about wonderful pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with wonderful pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller all day long. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's a perfect grab and go snack for busy days, constantly at the airport, constantly traveling. So I need a snack beside me. Get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Okay, Devils trail the series 2-0. To give you guys some hope, in 2023, the Devils lost back-to-back games to the Rangers 5-1, and then they ended up winning the series in 7. But, you know, this playoff run is a little different. I just want the Devils to win at least a game. That's all I can say. I don't want to see them get swept, but we'll see what games 3 and 4 have to offer. All right. Shots on goal differential, 28-26 in favor of the Hurricanes. I think the Devils did a better job of generating shots, generating looks. Unfortunately, sometimes your best is not good enough. Devils were 0 for 3 on the power play. Now, I know they sacrificed a shorthanded goal to Martinook, and Martinook had a good playoff run against the Devils in 2023. But the third period power play, the Devils were really clicking, in my opinion, and I really thought that they could have used another power play. So the referees really should have dinged Burns with headbutting Meier, but what do I know? Hurricanes were 0 for 3, but they had a shorthanded goal. Hits 51-31 in favor of the Devils. At least to bring the physicality. That's all I got to say. Because I think the Devils led in the hits category in game 1 as well. Giveaways, 15 a pop. Takeaways, 8-3 in favor of the Devils. Block shots, 14-9 in favor of the Hurricanes. Time spent in the penalty box, 8 apiece. If I had to give the Devils a letter grade, you know what? They played better in this game. They did sacrifice a shorthanded goal. They allowed a few 2-on-1s to the Hurricanes when the Devils were on the power play. Markstrom was really good. I like the heart of some players, especially Brett Pesce. Timo Meier was just snake bitten. He couldn't catch a break, whether it was getting headbutt or just whiffing on his shots. I'll give the Devils a C because they came out aggressive. They came out swinging, and they went down swinging. It's not like they rolled over. So I'll give the Devils a C. Wasn't their best outing, wasn't their worst, and I think it was definitely an improvement from game 1. But let me know your thoughts. What did you think of this performance from the Devils? What are your thoughts on the Timo Meier and Brent Burns situation? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X page app at TrainMat4 or the show's X page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Thanks for listening. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day in New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again.